So to get right into it, we're gonna start off by talking about the Fallout show and what I kind of perceive as glazing. And what I mean by glazing is just the fervent support that the show is getting and the complete bashing of anyone that has anything to say against the show that's not just completely positive. I think the show, for what it is actually pretty decent. The show does a really great job with props and how it presents itself. I do think that they nailed it when it comes to the themes and the sets of the show. Don't get me wrong, I actually do quite like the costuming quite a bit. But what I see is a lot of the Fallout community, specifically the Fallout community that has only really played up to 4 and probably started at 4 and is most likely like the 4 and 76 crowd that now makes up a majority of the Fallout community. At least when you go to online spaces such as Reddit or just other content creators that aren't necessarily Fallout focused, but they do recognize the series, such as Actman or Moist Critical. So if you're expecting just a rampant hate video here, that's
There's some kind of misunderstanding here.
What?
We're Fallout fans, okay?
Okay. Well, what kind of Fallout fan are you? You don't know?
not what you're gonna get. I actually did like the show at a lot of certain points, and I think there's a lot of great things that the show did that most adaptations do not do. But what I want to talk here today is about the things that I think could have been done better, and the things that a lot of fans and even some of the creators are saying that I just don't find to be true or necessarily correct when it comes to the show and how it's presented. So the first thing I want to talk about is the Fallout 4 style of the show. I think that that's something that was actually one of the weak points. While I do like the costuming and set design of this show, I think it's actually done very well. I think the complete and utter fall into the Fallout 4 design is extremely disingenuous of Fallout itself. I don't think that it really represents the series in its most potent potential, if that makes any sense. The examples mainly being power armor. While I do think the power armor in this show was done nicely, I do think it looks extremely good. It's better than what I think any kind of Fallout TV show would have ever done for power armor. I think explicitly going to the T60 design exclusively was actually a massive down point for me, because the T60 design, in my opinion, is just redone T45. I think if they really wanted to capture the Fallout essence, they should have used T51. And another big complaint that I have is that all of these knights and paladins, they only use the Fallout 4 assault rifle for whatever reason. And as you probably know, I think even the Fallout 4 community hates the Fallout 4 assault rifle. It is one of the ugliest weapons in the series. There is really no redeeming qualities to it. It looks like they attempted to make some kind of 30 caliber Browning into some weird assault weapon that's supposed to be used with power armor, but it just ends up looking extremely weak, when they could have very easily used something like the minigun or the Gatling laser that would have looked a million times better with this show's aesthetic and appearance, and it also would have just given that much of an oomph factor to the power armor. Because once you even see the fighting with these weapons, it just looks weak, and it just doesn't look as strong as you would expect a power armor scene to look within a show like this. Something about the power armors only using rifles, and especially that particular one, is just a really big complaint that I have, honestly. I think they could have scrapped that rifle and just used laser rifles, and I think it would have looked 1,000 times better than what they decided to do with this specific aesthetic. I really do not like the Fallout 4 aesthetic. I think a lot of the costume designs do harken back to Fallout 1, and that is a great thing. I think it makes a lot of the costume and set design look amazing, but then you have something like the power armor, the T60, which just looks kind of goofy and out of when you mix it in with a couple of other Fallout 1 things, like the Colt 10mm pistol from Fallout 1, which they bring back, which I did appreciate quite a bit, but still, it doesn't really feel like it is enough. I think that the Fallout 1 through New Vegas designs are the best that the Fallout series have seen, and you can even credit Bethesda with that, because New Vegas uses quite a bit of the Fallout 3 3 aesthetic. And I think that that was the perfect blend of realistic 3D Fallout design that was just incredibly visually appealing, and it drew your attention directly to the series because everything looked so unique and everything looked like it was its own special piece of the world. When you come to Fallout 4, however, it really loses that momentum and kind of just becomes goofy science fiction looking equipment, which I really do not care for. And I do like the 50 cal pistol that the Knights use, don't get me wrong. It's like that Desert Eagle looking one. I believe it's a pistol from Fallout 2, but I might have to go back and recheck that. But a lot of the pistols were actually extremely good. And even the Fallout 4 10mm pistol, I actually do like the design for because I think it does look a little bit better than the Fallout 3 blocky one. But I think a lot of the rifles and a lot of the heavy weapons really get a massive downgrade in this edition because I think just the Fallout 4 design really does not fit well in real life or even in science fiction. It just looks incredibly lame, blocky, and just uninspired. And just to reiterate, yes, I do completely understand they used some Fallout 1 weapons, and I did appreciate that, but I think overall, this show really does go for that Fallout 4 aesthetic, which I think a lot of people agree, just it doesn't look that good, and it doesn't look that Fallout. I think another really lame point is that laser rifles do have a relevant appearance within the show, but you don't ever actually see one get used. I was figuring that there would at least be one scene where you see someone use a laser rifle and disintegrate an opponent or a plasma rifle, and that just never happens. It's just all ballistic weaponry, which I think is fine, but I think a lot of the scenes just kind of get thrown back to the ghoul when it comes to the gore, and a lot of the scenes that are more massive and more involving of other groups and like the massive conflicts in the show just kind of get dumbed down to just like generic like people getting shot in the chest and just falling over, and it kind of takes out that gore aspect once it's not just like a solo scene with one of the main characters shooting other people. I think what happened with the lore stuff, moving on to that, is fine. I think that it's okay that they decided to write off the NCR the way that they did. I think that the way that they did it is the problem. It really makes no sense turning Vault-Tec into this Enclave-like villain. It makes sense that they would be similar to them, but it really just doesn't make sense to me that they're all of a sudden this powerful. To come out of like 5 or 6 different games of lore where Vault-Tec is assumed to be dead, and to just say, oh, Vault-Tec nuked Shady Sands, I really don't think that makes any sense. There's really no feasible way. Maybe season 2 will actually explain this more, because it did get renewed for a season 2, I believe, yesterday, as of the time of this recording. But I think the way that they did it, especially it being off screen, was just extremely lame, and just seems like they wanted to sweep everything under the rug and go forward with their new story. If this story had told how that happened and how that became a thing, I do believe that it would have been justified, especially with a lot of fans, if you actually just had the ability to see what happened. I think coming back to it after the fact with such a beloved faction just seemed a little bit cheap, and it just seems like they wanted to write off a faction because they didn't want to actually show what happened. And they may correct this in season 2, but still, where we're at right now, I feel like they really gave the NCR a lame write-off, and there could be more of them coming in the future. Todd Howard himself has said that this isn't the last we're going to be hearing of the NCR, so of course we are going to be getting more of the NCR story. But to just kind of write these characters and tell this really one-sided MacGuffin story, and then to just kind of destroy a faction that many people really liked and enjoyed off screen by the character's dad just because it was supposed to be Vault-Tec that brought about the new world, really doesn't make any sense. I think that the show had a lot more explaining to do, and it just didn't do it. I think that it's really weird that they go ahead and say, okay, the NCR had a fall of Shady Sands, and then the nuke happened sometime later. It just doesn't make sense. There was no feasible way that they would destroy the Legion in that amount of time from 2022. So that would mean that the bombs dropping were like incredibly recent if they had somehow destroyed the Legion, because you have to remember the Legion Legion wasn't just the warfront you saw in the game, it was an entire society of people behind the warfront. And to me, there's no reasonable explanation how the NCR could fall from grace and the Legion wouldn't capitalize on that. There would have to be some other way that they haven't explained yet that the Legion was just completely destroyed. And I don't think that they're gonna really show how that happened other than just saying, oh, Vault Tech nuked them too. And I think that's just extremely lame. Of course, that's just speculation on what's going to happen, but if you're being realistic, do you really think that the Bethesda Fallout team is going to continue the story of the Legion? Is Caesar's Legion a story that they want to tell in modern Fallout? And I think the answer to that is a resounding no. I do believe, because of how the Legion operates and how it's pretty much just a sexist, male-dominated, like hierarchical organization, I think that Bethesda just wants to completely wipe the slate clean when it comes to the Legion and is just going to completely disembowel that faction into just being like a joke, essentially. Because I do want to say, this is probably my biggest criticism of the Fallout show, is that it really leans into humor. I think Fallout in general does lean into humor, but it also knows when to be serious. I think the show is serious when it comes to Walter Goggins' character, but every other character, things just seem to kind of play off as a wild wasteland interpretation of Fallout in general, and just a more goofy, I guess the word would be like a post irony kind of humor way, where these characters kind of interact like Borderlands characters, where they're constantly giving one-liners and jokes to each other, and even in their most dire situations, they're still like kind of goofy and upbeat. And don't get me wrong, these characters are written 1,000 times better than a Borderlands game. That's just the closest thing that I can think of, where it's a post-apocalyptic type setting where the characters are always just so goofy and upbeat, even in the most horrendous of situations. An example I'll give is when Lucy is in the supermarket, and it's a very serious thing where people are harvesting the organs of living beings and selling them. It's just kind of treated as a joke with these two stoner characters that are just watching movies. And I forgot the actor's name, but that specific actor is just like always one of these TV joke stoner characters, and that really just kind of rubs me the wrong way when it comes to a very serious interpretation of Fallout. When you go back to the Fallouts like Fallout 1, Fallout 2, Fallout New Vegas, when it came to things like people selling organs and doing these very evil things, it was never joked about. It was never like supposed to be a funny or, you know, get your comeuppance, you stupid slaver type deal. It was always treated very seriously and with a lot of dignity and respect, which I just don't think this show was really doing, especially with such a serious matter. I mean, these guys were keeping slaves and harvesting organs, and then they're just kind of treated like these weird stoner jerks that aren't really doing anything that bad. It's just they happen to have a robot with them that's goofy. And I personally think that that takes away from Fallout, that does not add to it. I think that, yes, the show does need its comedic moments, and I think that they can be delivered, but I don't think when you're talking about very serious subject matters like that, turning it into kind of like a you know, yakety sax fucking violence, ultra gratuitous scene where these guys just get exploded and eaten by zombies. I just really don't think that's the move. And that's kind of where I want to go into the glazing part of this. I do think that these criticisms are valid, obviously, and I feel like when you try to voice them, people just go, oh, shut up. It's, you know, other than a few things, it's good. And I think that a lot of people don't even want to acknowledge the bad. And if you try to bring up anything negative about the show, you just get called like a neckbeard virgin who lives in his mom's basement. And I think that that's just like a really stupid way of looking at things. I think criticisms of any show are completely valid and actually only make the show stronger in the future. A good example being the Halo TV show. Everyone hated the first season, everyone went off on it, and then with those criticisms, the show did improve somewhat. Not a lot, but somewhat. And I think a lot of the people complaining about like lore and things of that nature are perfectly valid to do so. I see a lot of people, especially on platforms like Reddit, essentially stating that just because the lore is off doesn't mean it's not a good show. And I do agree with that to a point, but where I kind of draw the line is they make it seem like, when I say they, I mean like things I've seen, and I'm sure you've seen them as well, but they make it sound like having a straight I don't know what's the word I'm thinking of, god damn it, having a straight continuity of lore lore and writing a TV show have to be mutually exclusive, and that just because it's a TV show that means you can't follow the lore. I think that's massively incorrect. I think a good example would be something like Warhammer, where all of their shorts, movies, and everything, they follow the lore just fine and they add to it. It's one of those things where just because it's a separate medium from games, that it has to be different, and that it doesn't, like, there's no possible way for it to just follow all of that lore without being boring. And I just heavily disagree with that sentiment. I think it's one of those things where you can have your cake and eat it too. I just think that they need to respect that and go forward knowing that people care about this stuff. And when you put these things on a board, the fall of Shady Sands makes no sense. And there's no way in Fallout New Vegas that Shady Sands falls and not a single person mentions it. And several NPCs even reference Shady Sands existing in that current time period. I think they very easily could have just done their homework and said the fall of Shady Sands was in, and the show would have been, you know, it would have followed some level of continuity. But I think that doing these mistakes that retcon other games and previous titles, and then just going back in interviews and Twitter and saying, oh no, it's still canon, blah, blah, blah. I think that's a very cheap Band-Aid fix. I think that when you're making a multi-million-dollar show, you can't just have these random things in there where you have to go back, post, edit, and have Todd Howard fix it for you in an interview. I just feel like that's extremely lame. And I just feel like they could have gone about it so much better and actually like followed these plot points. And I think the Fallout show season 1 could have actually had more back in the past scenes. I think honestly they could have told the Ghoul story maybe a little bit more involving the NCR. Maybe there's 1,000 ways they could have done it, but I do feel like they could have dedicated an episode on exactly how the NCR fell rather than it happens. One of the things that, you know, bothers me is that it's when they're at the observatory, like it's labeled the NCR headquarters, and that's not like the NCR army, the NCR, it's literally just the NCR headquarters, which makes you think like, wow, this is all that's left of the NCR? That really doesn't make much sense. So that's one of the things that got me when I was watching the show in terms of like all the lore behind it. I think it was really done poorly to keep everything in track. I think that they had to go back and fix it. It's just really stupid. It's something they could have easily just put in the show and just avoided these problems in general. I mean, all these people that made the show are like, oh, we're huge Fallout fans, and just not knowing like, oh, one of the most popular games of the series, I think Fallout New Vegas actually beats out Fallout 4 in terms of fan favorite popularity, is like just checking the years of these things. Like these things, like a quick Google search could have told you when these games take place. And if you have to set the series in the 20s to match with your time, not the 20, I'm sorry, the 20, I don't really see a problem with that. There's no reason why you can't just move it ahead and say, oh, this show takes place in 20 because they move forward the fall of Shady Sands a little bit. I think that would have definitely given a lot of fans a little bit more peace of mind. A lot of people would still think it's extremely lame that the NCR died off screen. There's really no way that you can really rectify that other than actually just showing it in season 2. But I do think you would have had a lot less people complaining if they had just taken the time to check these lore things and make sure that their dates are accurate. I don't think a lot of people understand just how, for a lack of better word, autistic a lot of Fallout fans are when it comes to things like dates, times, and lore. And while a lot of people don't care, I think you'll recognize that the core fan base that has been playing the series since Fallout 1, Fallout 2, and even Fallout 3 will care about those things, because this is a series that means a lot to people, and people don't want to have to go the Halo route where they have to create a whole separate timeline of canon just because the directors took a couple liberties. And I'm not going to compare this to the Halo show. I think this show is a home run like 5 times out of the park compared to the fucking Halo show. They're not even close. This show, like I said, it's an extremely fun show to watch. I think there's a lot of really good things about this show, but I think these small tweaks could have brought it from being controversial among the core fan base and the non-core fan base, and would have just made it something that was universally praised throughout the shows. I think it's very important for them to get dates right in these things. And while you may say, oh, why do you care about these dates so much? It's a pedantic thing. I just think, you know, it's a multi-million-dollar production. This show, I believe, don't quote me on this, I believe it was around $200 million in terms of their budget. And when you're spending that kind of money, I think you can take 10 minutes to get your dates correct for storyboarding and to fit your story within that time period. I can look in about 10 minutes on any series and fit some fan fiction into the timeline if I just take an hour to go look in the lore and say, okay, this is when this happened, so I'm going to set this story in this time period so that it makes sense and fits with what I'm trying to do and the story that I'm trying to tell. And so just to kind of sum it up, my main complaints are I really don't like the post irony, like everyone's kind of goofy aspect. I think that that's more of a Fallout 4 thing and Fallout 76. Well, New Vegas, Fallout 3, and Fallout 1 and Fallout 2, they do have goofy moments and characters doing goofy things, but it's not all the time. They know when to take subject matter seriously and they know when to have like a fun time with it. And that's one thing that I really think that this show doesn't really do. I think that even in its most serious moments, it's still just having fun. Especially like another example I'll give is when the Raiders are attacking the vault. It's kind of just having a little montage of the Raiders having fun beating up vault dwellers. And I think that they were trying to somewhat like reference the Fallout 1 Unity ending where you just see the super mutants kind of beating up vault dwellers and killing them. But at the same time, I don't think it really lands because this whole scene has a super serious moment between Lucy and the Raider guy, and then it kind of just cuts to the Raiders just like having a blast, flexing, eating cake, shooting people, and just like gratuitous violence cut with this like kind of joking atmosphere. And while I do like the violence in the show, I think it was one of the best parts. I think that like mixing this comedy with a scene that's supposed to be extremely serious in nature just really didn't land with me. It was funny, don't get me wrong, like I found parts of it and I did laugh at it, but looking back, I think that this scene should have been taken a lot more seriously in terms of Lucy's character development, and it's really kind of just turned into a joke and a spectacle rather than being a defining moment of her character like it should have been. And I think the character that actually kind of gets these serious moments in some way is Maximus when he's at the Brotherhood training camp. I think these moments are some of the most serious in the show, but it quickly devolves into something like the Titus scene where you just see him running away like a coward going fuck, like a Borderlands character just constantly swearing and not being serious even though this is supposed to be like some big night of the Brotherhood. And then you just have Maximus kind of staring at him while all this is happening. I do like that it kind of led to the scene where Maximus is like, you don't deserve to wear that armor, and I do think that was like kind of cool for his character and a good development note. But at the same time, I feel like they could have done this scene so much better. Like imagine that scene where instead of maybe a Yao Guai, it's something like a Deathclaw or something of that nature, something a lot more serious, and you actually get to see the two fighting, and then you see Titus get killed like gallantly in battle, and then they manage to kill the Deathclaw, and then Titus tells him that he needs to complete the mission, and before he can like radio in anything, he ends up dying. And so Maximus ends up taking his suit and doesn't report it because he's scared that he's going to get punished or possibly killed for letting his knight die in battle. And I think that would have been like a much cooler character development scene than just having this goofy guy running around and just dying because he's an idiot. I think that definitely takes away and kind of makes the Brotherhood look like a joke. If these are the average knights and their most respected members, how are we supposed to believe that this is like a military force to be reckoned with? I think it kind of makes the Brotherhood look like a joke. And if they want the Brotherhood to be respected, I think having these moments between the characters where like he has to kind of move forward and continue the task in order to get redemption for letting his knight die in battle and having a moment between them would have been an infinitely better experience than what we got. And since we're kind of going on a ramble about the characters, I think the best character in the show, I mean, pretty much everyone agrees with this, is the Ghoul. He steals the show with every single scene. Every scene he's in is entertaining, it's fun to watch, but I do think that they could have done him a little bit better. I think that maybe showing some more of his past in the Wasteland would have been nice. Seeing like the first maybe few years after, 20 to 30 years after, would have been a lot more entertaining than just completely watching all the pre-war stuff. But again, that's something they'll definitely recognize in season 2. I'm pretty positive that they will. I don't see why they wouldn't. The character is pretty much their gold mine when it comes to this show, and a reason why I know a lot of people continued watching it, because like I said, every scene he's in, it just completely steals the show. So I wanted to make a quick 10-minute video, but it turned into a 30-minute rant, or however long this is once I'm done cutting down the audio. So I just wanted to kind of talk about this and get my opinion out there, because obviously, you know, Fallout's something that's super important to me, and I haven't uploaded anything in a while. I'm sorry. I'm gonna be real. My editing process before was just completely not half-assed, but it just took too long. It was really long and tedious, so that kind of was a barrier of entry where I had to spend 3 or 4 hours editing audio and putting the video together and everything like that. Whereas now I've found better editing methods that let me edit the audio in less than like 30 minutes. So that inefficiency has been corrected, so I do plan on uploading more. Fingers crossed. Every single time I made a video, I would say, oh, I'll be uploading more. I'm not going to put a harsh cap on that. I'm going to say that like now that I actually have good editing experience and software, I'm going to be hopefully making more of these. So if you like this video and want to see anything more like this, please like, subscribe, favorite, all that good stuff. And I appreciate the watch through. Have a good one, guys. Peace.